The Lifestyle Show, presented by
Sweeney.
If something is important, we write it down, don't we? We do. Yet 85% of the world's writing systems are on the verge of vanishing. Not granted official status, not taught in schools, discouraged and dismissed. Tim Brookes has written a book which is called An Atlas of Endangered Alphabets, Writing Systems on the Verge of Vanishing. The book is due to be published on Friday of this week, so delighted to be able to talk to Tim ahead of the release. Tim, good afternoon and welcome to the programme. How are you?
Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm great.
Not at all. I mentioned this to you off air. When I saw the book, I saw the title of the book and I saw the first line of the piece, the information that I was given by Wendy. I really thought it was about the fact that we don't write anymore. And we'll talk about that a little later on, but because it's a big topic. But when I dug deeper into the notes that I have, writing systems, explain what writing systems are.
Yeah, it's a term that only academics use, and I use it as seldom as possible for that reason.
Right.
But alphabets isn't quite accurate. So all over the world, people write in a variety of what we could call different letter forms. And so, for example, if you think of Cyrillic, or if you think of Chinese, or if you think of Arabic, we recognize that visually they are different from the Latin alphabet, which is the one that we use. What is really strange, and I've been discovering this since I started the Endangered Alphabets project 15 years ago, is that because we are kind of the winners, in the sense that the Latin alphabet is used by more people around the world than every other script or writing system put together, we kind of forget, or we don't even notice, that the others are even there. Interestingly enough, if in Europe we recognize different languages, and we also even recognize different minority languages and their importance to their culture, whether it be Catalan, for example, or Basque or Breton, and there's a tremendous revival and a recognition that that language is really, really important to that community. But because everybody throughout Europe, or especially Western Europe, uses the Latin alphabet, we tend to forget the same question can be asked about writing. If we were in India, we would never make that mistake, because in India, there are 1,000 different languages and over 100 different ways of writing them, alphabets, scripts, call them what you like. And so they are super aware of the differences and the fact that each of these is vital to the identity of its community. And most educated Indians write in 3, 4, 5 different scripts.
So why is this happening? Is it because we're living in a time when it's tunnel vision? If it's not AI related right now, if it's not technology related, if it's not, if it doesn't conform, then it's forgotten about. Is that where we're at?
That is the most recent acceleration of the problem.
Okay.
So really, it starts in Europe when the Romans overrun everybody. And so they're kind of like, we now own you. And so this now becomes the default alphabet. And interestingly enough, hundreds of years later, we're still saying, the Romans were a good thing. They gave us straight roads and aqueducts. They are actually conquerors. And this has been happening ever since. And so when the Spanish go to South America, they are absolutely deliberate about destroying and burning existing codices, which is the books and stone representations of language, because they say they're heathen, they're pagan, they are they're from the devil, etc. So really, any time any culture tries to overtake, overrun, subjugate another culture, one of the things they will probably do is to insist that the dominated culture uses the alphabet of the winners. And in fact, I have a saying, which is history is written by the winners in the alphabet of the winners. And so the fact that Europeans have been overtaking various parts of the world for centuries is really what has brought us to the point before AI, when, even before AI came in, all of those endangered alphabets I discovered were endangered. It's just that things are now happening even faster. And as you said at the beginning, the very act of writing, especially writing by hand, is now becoming endangered.
Is this something that I suppose is driven by ignorance and not understanding the value of culture and understanding the value of the past and the importance of it?
Oh, great question. So there is no doubt that we in the West, and I'm speaking from the United States, where this is even more true, we tend to think that whatever progress happens and whatever technology carries that progress is a good thing, even if it means that a younger generation is essentially distanced from its parents or its ancestors. And so the fact that we now have kids here who can't read cursive, and so they can't read any historical documents, and they're being distanced from what they increasingly regard as being irrelevant because it's in the past. I'll tell you a very quick story about somebody from the island of Java in Indonesia who wrote to me thanking me for all the work I've been doing on endangered alphabets, and saying that she discovered a box with letters from her grandfather who had fought in the Indonesian War of Independence after World War II. And she was fascinated. She wanted to know what that was like, what it was like for him, what it was like for the country, But they were written in the traditional Javanese script. And when Indonesia achieved independence, the first thing they did was to say, exactly. We've got 17,000 islands here. We've got 6 major religions. We've got the 5th largest population in the world. How are we going to create unity? We are all going to use the modern alphabet, the Latin alphabet. And so all of the schools on all of the islands stopped teaching those traditional alphabets. And so for her, progress is, if I learn my traditional Javanese script, it will reconnect me to my family, to my family's history, to understanding who we are and where we've come from. And that is a much more kind of Eastern rather than Western attitude. So in that sense, you are completely right.
How can we stop it then? How can we stop the rot, as the man says?
So there's a number of different things. Some of them really abstract, some really concrete. I actually have just published a pair of books. So the one you referred to, the Atlas of Endangered Alphabets, is the one that really identifies all these scripts and all these cultures and says, this is why they're interesting and important. My other book that goes with it, hand in glove, is called Writing Beyond Writing. And that really squarely addresses this question, what is happening to writing and what can we do about it? Your question, in other words. So one thing is that at the moment, the devices that we're creating to enable us to use the speed and the transmissibility and the storage of writing, the digital devices, they typically all have keyboards. And what that means is that our kids don't learn to write by hand, they learn to type. And there's a ton of evidence that shows that if you learn to write by hand, you learn more quickly, you retain more. Even if you use a keyboard generally, but you take notes by hand, you retain those notes better because writing by hand triggers the motor memory. And so more of your memory faculties are engaged in the process of writing and then reading. So one of the things that I think is absolutely essential is to increasingly develop digital devices that you actually write on by hand, so that it's not a question of one or the other. But the bigger question really is one of respect. The reason we have been doing this for centuries, overrunning other cultures, is because we believe we were superior to them. And if you regard cultures as being worthy of respect in themselves, then you don't say, oh, you know what? You have this alphabet that you use, but you know what? We're going to give you the Latin alphabet. We're going to make you literate. And it's always a devil's bargain. It's a tainted thing to say, I'm going to give you literacy in my alphabet, because it means I'm taking away some of your traditions, some of your understanding of who you are and what makes you different from your neighbors.
That's looking at writing kind of in a general sense. We might come back to that in a second. But in relation to the endangered alphabets, is there anything that we can do to stop what has happened? We are where we are with it. So yes. Can we reintroduce it in schools, in countries that might have had text and so on?
So this is the really remarkable thing that has changed since I started the Endangered Alphabets project. There has been this kind of global counter move, this groundswell, which has taken two forms. One is people starting to reintroduce or reteach or promote their own traditional scripts that have fallen or been suppressed into disuse. The other is this extraordinary movement to create new scripts for cultures that either didn't have one or they were kind of had a conqueror's script imposed upon them 200 years ago, 400 years ago, whatever. And so especially in South Asia and in Africa, this is the golden age of script creation. As you and I are speaking, there are probably at least 15 different scripts or alphabets being invented usually by an individual for their culture and their culture's language, so that they can have their own way of writing, and they can not have to sort of communicate with each other through the writing system of somebody who conquered them 200 years ago.
Is this like having your own lingo, developing just so that you can communicate with another person in a crowded room, and you just want that person to understand you? Great question. I hadn't thought of that analogy. My first thought is that new languages are very, very rarely invented. New scripts are being invented all the time. But what you say is, it's more like, oh, wow, I wasn't expecting to tell this story. When my mother was dying of cancer, she had a certain amount of energy, but, it was very limited. And she said, she was so smart, she said, I only want people around me from my family and my immediate friends, because it takes so much energy to make myself understood. I want to be with people who understand me, even if I just say part of a word or part of a sentence. And when you have a culture that, for example, like the Karen people who are driven out of Myanmar in an act of genocide, and they're living in refugee camps, which is basically hell, then the notion that they can speak their own language and they can write their own language is a way of staying sane, and it's a way of reassuring themselves that they are still alive. Of course, it's going back to just codes, isn't it? From the wars, you everything is in code, and you try and decipher it, and that's really what it is.
It is and it isn't.
Okay.
So there are definitely instances. There's a fabulous instance where this extraordinary woman, who was probably one of the most literate people who ever lived, who was living in under the Dutch, in what was then the Dutch East Indies, and she invented a code whereby she and fellow revolutionaries could actually pass messages to each other, and the Dutch wouldn't even realize there was a message there. That was brilliant. The danger of thinking about it as a code, and in fact, this is the way in which many professional linguists have thought about writing, is that you tend to believe then that any set of symbols would do. It's just a code for this, and you could take it and replace it with a different set of symbols. One of the first things I realized when I was doing the Endangered Alphabets project is that there are cultures whose writing form is so important to them that they still use it in various contexts, even if no one can read it. And so I'm just going to take a wild guess and say you're Irish, right?
What? Give it away.
So, if you're in Cork and you go into a tourist shop, you can buy pendants and earrings and whatever in the letters of the Ogham script, which is the old Irish script from, 1,000 years ago. And people in Ireland feel that is their script, right? They can't read it, they can't write it, nobody can figure out everything that it means, but this is who we are. This is who we were before Christianity. This is who we were before the bloody English came along.
You said that, not me.
I know, it's in my book, Writing Beyond Writing. It's absolutely there. I have an Irish friend who burst out laughing when he read that. But it's true. It's the visual sense of writing is so closely connected with this is who we are, or in some cases, this is who we were.
Why would somebody be bothered, in inverted commas, to learn a new script or to develop a new script? Because it can only be used by the others who understand it. And the world around us is a very big place, a very small place.
Yes.
And it's all based on the Latin alphabet. So is it something that you have to have in your heart and in your blood that wants you to do this?
Oh, boy. I tell you, your voice became more and more Irish when you said in your heart and in your blood. Yeah. So here's the thing. In Western Europe in particular, we get by only using one script, the Latin alphabet. And so it seems to us as if it must be unbelievably difficult to learn more than one. If you are living in Asia or South Asia, you already know two or three. And so it doesn't strike you as being particularly difficult to learn another one.
Okay.
Because we are top dogs, we are therefore blind to what's going on. And we're also very poor linguists because we expect everybody else to kowtow to us. In addition to that, there are scripts that are so specific to their culture and, say, for example, their culture's sacred practices that I'm thinking now of one where every letter is associated with a particular body part of their divinity, their deity. And so to learn that script is part of learning to be a member of that culture and that faith. It's not an academic exercise, and it's not really a question of why should we bother. It seems to us like a bother. To them, it seems like reclaiming their birthright.
Mm. When I was 9, I went into a new class, when you move class, summertime or whatever,
yep.
And the teacher said to us, when you come back during the summer, after the summer break, to start the year officially, you've all got to get rid of your biros and your pencils, and you must only write with a fountain pen in my class. I'm 57. There's my fountain pen.
Nice.
I have one in my rucksack so that if I'm out and I want to write, I write with my fountain pen. I have one in my office in Spain where I write only with my fountain pen. And I've just started back to that. I used to reserve my fountain pen for writing things like, important birthday cards or anniversaries or documents or something. And I said, why would I do that? Because it's so much more fun to write with the pen. And it's lovely. And to think that we're losing the ability to write is kind of scary.
So that is very much one of the questions that I pursue throughout Writing Beyond Writing, which is, what is writing? What is the act of writing? And so when you write with a fountain pen, you are bringing a certain sense of aesthetic judgment, a level of quality to what you write. You want to write in a fashion which is pleasing to you. If you're writing with a pencil or a ballpoint pen, you kind of give yourself the freedom to scribble. So straight away, and your listeners may not know that the way I started the Endangered Alphabets project was by carving all of these. I'll hold one up now. So this is radio. I'm holding up a piece of wood.
Okay, go on.
With the letter E from the Cham script of the now defunct Kingdom of Champa.
Okay.
And it is the most beautiful thing. It looks like, for example, a wisp of smoke rising and separating.
Yeah, it's lovely.
It's just lovely, right? And so in carving these, I started asking myself these questions. What is the relationship between writing and the human hand? The fact is that when you write something by hand, you engage dozens of muscles into that, all of which remember what you're doing. You type, every keystroke is essentially the same. And so there isn't that sense that what you're doing is a manifestation of your physical body. So the word autograph etymologically means self-portrait. When you write, you are presenting yourself and your identity to the world. You're saying, this is who I am. And it's sort of fascinating that we're having all these conversations about AI now, and how are we going to know if students have written their own papers? Because digital writing is anonymous. If you get an email from somebody and you don't recognize the email address, it could be anything. If you see something on Twitter, you have no idea if it was written by a bot or not. And we're just starting to kind of go, wait a second, did we do something wrong here? How are we going to do this? And writing, for all that it's slower and more limited, is also much more personal. And it is an opportunity for you to take those the joy of creation, of writing, for example, a letter your particular way, that nobody else writes their letter that way. It becomes that relationship between yourself and other people through the paper or whatever it is that you're writing on.
That's all fine and dandy, except for I remember recently, or a couple of years ago, I did some thank you cards on behalf of the family to some people who had been kind to us after a bereavement. And my brother, who's 4 years younger than me and has a very dry wit, said to me, "Oh, I saw the card that you sent to so-and-so." And I said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "Your writing has got very old." So, but that tells you that you can see something about a person when you see their hand or their handwriting. You know whether they're a young person or an old person or whatever, and it tells a story in itself.
Yes, and in fact, I can look at my writing and I can tell what time of day I wrote it, because I haven't become like frantic and tired by the end of the day. And there are certain times when I have a certain mentality and I write more upright than others. And actually, if you look at grocery or greengrocer's signs, okay, so there's a little tag which says how much these apples cost. And if you look at ones in England and then in Spain and in France and in Germany, they're all slightly different. There are certain characteristics of script that are taught in different countries that say not only are you separate as an individual, but you're actually writing in this French style, and I can tell by your two, for example.
Yeah, all that. Listen, the book is called An Atlas of Endangered Alphabets, Writing Systems on the Verge of Vanishing. Tim Brookes is the author of same. And the book goes on sale from Friday, or Thursday, 29th, isn't it? It goes on sale and it will be available to our listeners on our website, which is tre.radio. We have a virtual bookstore there. Tim, I'm sorry I've delayed you. I hope I didn't delay you too much, but the conversation was fascinating. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I wish you well with the book. And if you write to me, use the Latin script, will you please? Just in case.
Yes. The only one I know.
There you go. Listen, good luck with the book and thanks a million for a fascinating conversation.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
See you. Bye-bye.